when you lose the wisdom of this world and you become a creationist, it can be a very beautiful journey and set you free in so many ways and allow you to see the crazy level of lies that are put out there by the ones that run this place. And it's not easy. It's a lot to take in. It takes some of us a long time to sort through all of it, to be able to wrap our minds around it. It's definitely not easy. But from what I'm hearing, the hardest part is having the entire world think you're foolish and crazy, because what you have lost is the wisdom of this world, and the wisdom of this world that we had always heard was foolish to God. We never knew what that meant, nor did we even consider that we might just have that exact same wisdom and be under the influence of the wicked ones that are lying to our children and to us and have been controlling this world for quite a while. So, I personally, like many of you, have experienced that, and it's not easy. You start to get used to it, but here lately I've experienced some things at work that have made it a little more challenging, because somehow, I'm not really sure exactly how or how much they really know, but they've been dropping some hints that they know something, and one of those hints came in the form of a gift. This gift was a book that was placed in my mailbox by another teacher who I'm assuming is trying to get me to wake up to the fact that evolution is real and that you cannot be a creationist without denying science, because that's what the book that was in my mailbox was all about. I thought at first it was just some science catalog, but there was no address and there was no name on it. It was simply placed in there in the inner office mail for me. So I started looking into this book, and right away it has a lot of the exact same things that I've already investigated and that have fallen apart, but it also had some other information that I wanted to share with you and anyone who is a science teacher, anyone who believes we deny science. You need to see what we're seeing, because my journey did not start with the shape of this earth and how it moves. That was nowhere on my radar, and if it wasn't for spiritual reasons, I would have never even looked at it. But it was spiritual reasons that brought me here, and science that continually keeps me here, because I believe what I can prove. Now, this book says things that most of you scientists already know, and that's that the formal scientific definition of a theory is quite different from the everyday meaning of the word. It says here that it refers to a comprehensive explanation of some aspect of nature that is supported by a vast body of evidence. I agree with that 100%. It goes on to say that many scientific theories are so well established that no new evidence is likely to alter them substantially. For example, no new evidence will demonstrate that the Earth does not orbit around the Sun. Heliocentric theory. The problem I have with this one little theory that they are saying has vast amounts of evidence, or vast bodies of evidence, I should say. The problem I have with that is that there is no experiment that has ever proven or indicated that the Earth and the ground that we're standing on is moving at any speed through space, let alone the 66,600 miles per hour that we're given. No test, no experiment, no body of evidence. We have animations of it, but even the Apollo astronauts who were pretending to go to the moon did not encounter any movements of Earth whatsoever within the 48 hours that the Earth should have moved millions of miles, given the speeds that we are given. They went straight to the moon and straight back, and never had to account for those movements at all. And no, the Earth does not move in a straight line according to that model. It's a curved path, so those motions would have been detected at some point. Not moving in a straight line, definitely not going to be something to ignore. But before I talk about that and get into that aspect of the science, I want to start where my journey started, and that's with evolution. The science that's put in front of us as fact, as that theory that has so much evidence that we just might as well accept it and roll over and give up being creationist because it's already been proven. And this book said that they gave me that for the last 150 years we've compiled so much evidence that is pretty much true, and to be a creationist you have to deny all of that evidence and deny science in general. But I can remember when I was in school as a young child, somewhere around the 5th grade, I started seeing pictures that supported evolution. And one of those pictures was the one you see right here. It was a picture of embryos that started at the earliest stages of development looking exactly alike, and they were from different organisms. You had the embryos of a human in early stages all the way until fully developed, and then you had the same thing with a chicken, a turtle, and a fish. And when I looked at these as this open-minded, or rather closed-minded little kid who believed everything I saw in pictures in a book, even if it was a cartoon like this one here, I believed it. And so I looked at this and thought, wow, how impressive is that I look a lot like a chicken in my early stages, and a lot like a turtle, and a lot like a fish. I think they even had a pig in there in the one that I was looking at, but it was something very similar to this. A little cartoon sketched out, and it looked as if the scientists that drew it had to know what they were talking about, because it's in a science book, right? That's what we all thought. We had a lot of trust, and at this point in my life I had no reason to doubt the authenticity of these images, but it wasn't until I had been teaching biology for a couple years that my brother actually brought it to my attention that those images were fraudulent, that they were drawn over 100 years ago in the late 1800s by a man named Ernst Haeckel. Back before people could actually compare pictures of them, this guy had drawn them to support the newly popular theory of evolution. We'd already had some hoaxes like the Piltdown Man and things like that that were kind of being thrown around at the same time, but this guy was ahead of his time as far as pulling off fraud that made it into the textbooks, because what he did was something very sinister. He took embryos that looked like the ones you see down here at the bottom that are nothing alike and drew them in a fraudulent way that made them all look nearly identical at early stages. He didn't just completely remove parts, he altered their shape and everything about them to look alike. That is not science. And someone like me and millions of children have seen these and believed them and trusted them as if they were factual, proven images, and they're not. They're still in books today. They're still on tests. They are used throughout the world as proof of a common ancestor. And if you don't believe me, you can read what the books say, and they use words like this: the fact. The fact that early development of fish, birds, and humans is similar indicates that these animals share a common ancestor. These two words here, common ancestor, meaning that you and I came from some bacteria. There's no fossil of this bacteria. There's no evidence of this little single-celled organism that somehow formed billions of years ago. We all are related to that. And this was evidence that supported that, so they've allowed it to stay in books deceptively, even though it was admitted to be a fraud over 100 years ago. It's not like we have no clue that it's a fraud. Embryologists can now look at these things and study them and see them and share pictures of them. That is the science that I am going to deny, and that you, as an educator or someone with children that are being educated, should also be concerned about. Should not be exposed to that anymore. But Haeckel isn't the only one. There are other organizations who do things like that. National Geographic magazine, we talked about before, how they had their dino bird that was allegedly this link between dinosaurs and birds, because every time they have a theory, they always find this evidence that backs it up. Even though no one finds it except for the people who are looking for it, they find this evidence and it becomes popular, it takes off, there's images that go along with it, they have all sorts of animations that back that up, and then you find out that it's fraudulent and you never hear a word about it in the mainstream media. You just have to go and do some research to find out that it's a hoax. And people still believe, when they see the images that go along with it, that it wasn't, that it was real. And it takes me back to the times when I was young again, just like with the embryo drawings, and I saw drawings like this. Here's some of the evidence. They have drawings of fish that tried to walk on land using their fins, and somehow they started getting lungs. And these lungs and these fins turned into feet, and before long their future generations were turning into land animals. Even though they had to go back in the water to lay their eggs, somehow their offspring started growing feet, because they just somehow knew that their parents were trying to crawl on land, and so they started getting lungs and all of that through mutations or whatever, and they ended up becoming land animals and becoming part of this family tree, one that I've seen many times and one that they want me to show to my students, of these specimens that they found, like the coelacanth. This is one that I can vividly remember being shown as a link between creatures like this and other creatures that have fins that look like they could be starting to turn into feet, to eventually where you have every single land animal that's ever existed, including us humans. So we came from fish, is what they want us to believe. And so I later found out, sadly, similar to the embryos, that there are specimens that were found of this fish from as early as the 1930s to prove that it wasn't some extinct species that evolved into any land animal, that it still exists and is exactly as it was in the fossils. It hasn't changed at all. No little feet, no toes, nothing. Just a fish that is very spectacular and awesome to look at in nature. It's very intelligently designed and is exactly as the fossil shows it to be, allegedly millions of years ago. Now, in that book, the book that I was given as a gift, it didn't use the coelacanth. I was surprised. It used some other creature, and this creature was called Ichthyostega. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but that was the scientific name of this little creature, and they said this was the new evidence that I should look at. This was the missing link between fish and land animals. I had seen pictures of this before, and they made it look like, when you go on the internet and look for it, that they have tons of these specimens. But I want you to see the evidence that I found when I looked into this, because it does appear that there are tons of these things, that they went out and started digging and found many of them. However, if you use the scientific method or just any type of elementary investigative skills, you will soon find out that every single one of these is a copy of the other one. They don't have new evidence. They have fraudulent images where they have doctored these things up to look like new specimens, and they didn't even bother to change the pose that this little guy had when he died, if he was even a real creature and not something that someone just carved to look like a missing link, like so many times that's been done in the past with evolution. But you look at how hard they try. With this one here, they even sprinkled little pieces of like straw around and decorated it to look like it was found in a different location than this one, and this one, and this one. Like, this looks like it's made into smooth concrete. Doesn't even look like they tried too hard on that one. But they're trying to get you to believe these are different specimens. And here on this little model that they've made, they've even added new little bones to its back right here. Probably going to try to pass that one off as something totally different as well, because you don't see those little spikes in any of these specimens. And this thing, to me, doesn't even have the same exact bone structure as anything I see today, as far as how the ribs are shaped, the hands, anything. No symmetry here. The hands don't even look the same. It's like they just laid down some bones and took a picture. It's very sloppily done, and it's fraudulent. It's more lies. I should not see lies. The truth does not need lies and fabricated evidence to support it. And there's a reason we deny those types of science. because they are fraudulent and misleading, similar to these really ancient fossils that took thousands of years to form, because I later found out when investigating that we have a fossilized octopus. And if you know anything about these creatures, they have no bones. Within a few days, they're just a pile of goop after they die. It would take some miraculous circumstances to turn one of these into a fossil, but it definitely doesn't take hundreds or thousands of years like I was taught. Fossils can be made rather quickly, similar to if there was a giant flood that came across this earth where the fountains of the deep opened up and the floodgates of heaven opened up and poured down large amounts of water, large enough to move the surface of the earth, to cause mud flows, to move and to trap organisms, aquatic organisms, land organisms, lots of organisms, to trap them in a way that makes a mold. It preserves them, it kind of encapsulates them and allows them to be fossilized. That's why you see so many aquatic animals that are still alive today that were alive pre-flood, and they haven't changed one bit. They call them living dinosaurs and all of that, but really the evidence supports a flood. That's why you have a fossilized octopus. They say that, wow, the chances of this, it's like having a fossilized sneeze. It's very rare because of it taking hundreds of thousands of years. But in reality, we have learned ways to make fossils rather quickly in a lab. So it does not take as long as we were told. The situation that created many of these fossils was the flood that caused the earth to move and cover up lots of living organisms. Now, I'm going to switch gears. There are so many more fascinating things about intelligent design that I could go over, and some of the holes to evolution, like irreducible complexity and just the overall complexity of life itself, all of the symbiotic relationships that must go on for so many different species to even survive. There are so many miraculous things that go on with life that we can't even replicate it in a lab. So, space, that we all are said to deny, the proven facts of space travel. And as so many of you have seen, the flag scene where they planted the flag on the moon, and you've seen all of these great videos like Mythbusters where they go and debunk the whole flag moving scenario. Well, I'm going to use science to prove that what you're seeing is not possible. When you see a flag wave, and not because they touched it with their hands, we're not talking about that wave. That's the only one they address, is when they were setting it in the ground and it waved. We're not talking about that. During Apollo 15, that flag waved when an astronaut who was several feet away from it ran past it. So I'm going to play that clip and let you see that, so that you can see that it waves. We're not making that up. So there's the flag in a vacuum, allegedly, stationary, not moving. Someone moves the camera, and then an astronaut hops by, and the breeze that he created made that flag move in a vacuum. Not everyone is familiar with the science of how vacuums work and how they would affect things like a flag waving. So luckily for us, we can use real science to show you why we deny the false science and the lies coming from certain organizations who feed us all sorts of information, and it has become mainstream. We all believed it, we loved it, and it's simple to repeat with experiments like this one here, where you have a fan and a vacuum chamber, and the vacuum chamber is not even going to become a perfect vacuum. This person here is trying to simulate what he believes the Martian environment is like based on what he's been told. Now he turns this fan on, and when he does, that feather is representative of what the flag should be like on the moon, or pretty close to it. And that feather, when the fan is turned on, does not move. Not at all. So simple experiment exposes the lies, and when he takes this vacuum chamber and equalizes it with the regular atmosphere, the feather moves, just like the flag moved on the moon stage. And that's just one of many reasons why we deny things like the moon landing. You also have times where there is sound that is made in a vacuum, like this scene here with the astronauts hammering on the moon. Listen for yourself. Here it is.
Good. Doing good.
Yep, you're doing good, all right. Deceiving the world and getting caught red-handed, thanks to real science. So again, lots of reasons that we deny the science given to us by our government and the powers of this world and the evil ones that deceive so many. And here I'm going to show you another example that I've shown before. This is for those of you who claim we deny science. Here's another reason why. You can see what we were told is Earth from space. You look at it, seems authentic. They did not have computer animation back then from what we can gather. So it has to be real. That's what many of us thought when I looked at it in a book and saw those pictures. Again, my young mind said, that's it, that's where I live. However, they were telling us that this was taken from a camera that was placed in the window. Sadly, you can see an arm or some part of a body pass in between the camera and the window, proving that that was a lie. But that's not where it ends. It gets a lot worse for these deceivers because they adjust their settings and remove the fake Terminator line, and you can see when the inside of this place lights up that that was not the Earth from deep space. That was something like a plain window. There is no way that the Earth, that tiny little blue marble, could light up the spacecraft like that. You can also look at the Terminator line from some screenshots we've compiled and see that there's no way it would change from convex to concave within that short amount of time. And like I said, there was no computer animation, so the picture of the Earth on the moon has to also be suspect. How did it get there? Well, let's take a look and find out that, it's exactly the same as the one from the window. So they did have cut and paste, only it wasn't done on a computer. It was done the old school way. And that's why it showed up in the picture just like it did there in the background, to where when people later on were investigating this fraud, adjusted the levels, you can see a box appear around the Earth. And that's why. It's the same one they created so magnificently when they were allegedly on their way to the moon, showing us the Earth from deep space. Again, this type of fraud is something that I will not accept as science. And I could go on for hours showing you other reasons why we deny the science that the world thinks that we should accept as proven facts with lots of data to support it. But I wanted to make this to get wheels turning, because I know time is definitely running out in terms of finding out who you really are and how loved you really are and what your true purpose is, because the reason behind all these lies and the hidden proofs of creation is to stop you from finding that love. The wisdom of the fallen and the ones who rule this world is everywhere. And if you have it, you will indeed seem wise, and losing it is not easy, but it's worth it. So for those of you who have reached out to us, there are many of you who feel like sometimes it's just too hard to live in this world all alone, it seems, the only one who can see the lies. But don't be discouraged. You are not alone. Think about the Father who has put this stationary earth beneath your feet, and how long it's been since people have truly looked up and known where He is. These are great times to be alive. Time is definitely running out, and we really need to maximize our time to get people ready. Not everyone's going to wake up. I was reading something in Ezra the other day that made it more clear, where it talked about the elect, and it related us to gold. When you're panning for gold, you're going to go through a lot of earth, a lot of soil, a lot of rock. You're going to have to filter out a lot to find the tiniest little grains of gold. Well, the gold represents the elect and everything else that's cast aside represents those who will perish. It's not something the Father takes joy in. It's with great sadness. Death is definitely the enemy. It will be the last enemy to be defeated. It was never His will at creation. We chose that, and you've seen the downfall and the result of that ever since. So I want you guys to share the love that you're experiencing. Do not seclude yourself or feel alone at all. We're all here for each other. We're one big family. That's why we call ourselves the brothers, because you are our sisters and brothers, and we are one eternal family. If you don't believe that we're going to be together forever, or you've never experienced that joy, that overwhelming joy and love, we want you to. There are miracles and things right around the corner. It just takes some trust and trying it out and proving all things. You're going to find out reality isn't what you're told. As mind-blowing as it is, there's way more to it than just a bunch of lies to compile. There is great victory out there, and the world, you can have it and it comes at a price, but you can have joy unspeakable and a love that you've never felt before and forgiveness of everything you've ever done, and the price has already been paid.